Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 75, in which we are going to discuss Apollo 17 photo AS 17 135 20680. If you look on the screen right now, you'll see that photo. This was actually uploaded to the web by NASA when they were uploading a string of magazines of photos that were taken during what at that time was not known to be the final Apollo moon mission. Now, the photo was marked blank. That by itself is nothing crazy. A lot of the times when you're using, the Hasselblad Kodak cameras, when you get to the final frame or two, if you know you're going to be shooting a long succession of photos, you usually just take, a shot or two at the end just to clean out the canister and just make sure that every photo is exposed. So it's not crazy that, at the end of a magazine of film that you would have burnt frames. This is just a very common practice. But there was something very interesting about this photo specifically. When you burn a frame, what you're basically doing is creating a high or a low contrast, so that the frame comes out either all black, or in this case, bright white or bright gray. So what initially appears to be a solid color with no detail actually has a lot of detail, because within black and within white, there are billions of varying shades of gray that the eye cannot see when put side by side. But when you start bringing the contrast up or down and bringing out those varying shades, which is basically adding more color to what those shades are, more definition between the two, you'll start to make out details. As you can see on this photo here, there was something very unique that appeared. A pyramid. A massive pyramid appeared to be in the frame. In fact, if you take the contrast and play with it even further, you can see what appears to be some sort of massive monolith. Now, the concept of monoliths being found on other planets or moons is nothing new. The most famously known monolith was actually pointed out by Buzz Aldrin, who got very excited when the first photos of Mars came back, of not only Mars, but the moons of Mars, specifically Phobos. On Phobos, what appeared to be a completely massive artificial structure that appeared to be a monolith was photographed in high detail. Now, if you don't know what a monolith is, it's kind of like a cobblestone, like something, big that was created with writing on it to say, I was here, that type of thing. And it's built to last throughout the course of time. A lot of times we will create monoliths after wars and things like that. Well, a lot of people believe that there are monoliths that are placed throughout our galaxy as well. And as we send things like the Hubble out and different rovers, we repeatedly get these photos that have these similar characteristics. And pyramids being probably the most observed. So the question is, were these photos taken during Apollo 17, were they intentionally blanked with a high contrast, knowing that they could bring out, the details, the important details as far as size, distance, those things. That this is a way to basically photograph something, but essentially hide it. A very, kind of minimalistic way, but nonetheless effective. Did Gene Cernan, Harrison Schmitt, and Ronald Evans, which were the 3 astronauts on board Apollo 17, were they sent there to photograph this monolith and this pyramid on purpose with the intentional method of transporting this information back to NASA being a blown out, burnt frame? To be honest, if you're just looking for basic size and detail, it's smart. The average human being isn't going to see a blank photo and think, oh, let me mess around with the contrast. And you also have to remember that when this photo was taken, this was, a decade before programs like Photoshop were even invented. I mean, people did not even have a home computer at this point. I mean, this was, at that time, this would be a rather ingenious method of sending information in a way that, appears at first like it's hidden, that you can bring out, It'd be a really genius way to do it. What's really weird is all of the astronauts, they've been asked about this many times. They have no comment. All of them have no comment. NASA has been asked about this photo many times, and they have no comment as well. Now, the skeptical-minded, they claim that weird things appear in burnt photos all the time, and they basically present this photo. If you look on the screen right now, you can see it. This is another burnt frame that was taken inside the lander, in which the camera was pointed down at the ground, where they say, well, that's close enough. That just shows right there that things could look different. And I would agree. That looks, similar. There are some similarities. But I also think there's some major differences. I think that one looks like the busy floor of a lander with all kinds of objects going in many directions. But the photo in question appears to have depth and landscape to it and large areas that are affected by light. If I was a betting man, I would say one is definitely not the floor of a lander and one is. That doesn't mean that I would, put my life on the fact that I think this is a pyramid. But if I had to guess between the two, as a professional filmmaker who works with film and also messes around with Photoshop and, animates and does my own graphic design, and somebody who's been doing this for 20 years, if I had to guess, I would say that one of these photos is a burnt frame of a camera pointing down, and the other one is not. It is something either outside a window, outside a bay door, or was taken by someone who was standing outside. And that's just the large swathing way that the light moves, and especially the discernible angles. It's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. And I know people say all the time, well, it could just be a coincidence. And I've done an entire podcast before about coincidences. I mean, so what are the coincidences that a moon mission goes off as scheduled, which, by the way, this was our final moon mission, according to the government and NASA, supposedly. I don't believe that for a second. I think this was the mission where they started realizing there's some danger in us just putting all of this information out to the world every time, we go to the moon. I think they realized that it probably wasn't that smart, especially because, We didn't go to the moon for vacation. There are a lot of really practical reasons that we would want to control the moon, specifically the dark side of the moon, which, mind you, is not dark. We just call it that because we don't see it. Because the moon, oddly enough, another one of 100 bizarre things about the moon is in a tidal lock, meaning it just happens to, rotate perfectly with our rotation, where we all only see one side of it. So, but just like the Earth, every time that moon spins around, the sun's lighting up the backside of it. But there are a lot of reasons why we would want to own and control the moon, especially if we're exploring the galaxy. There are a lot of reasons, military reasons, that we would want to control the moon when it comes to planet Earth. So Apollo 17, it's not a surprise to me that suddenly we were not going to the moon anymore. I mean, think about this. It's not like NASA ever shut down, So since Apollo 17, what have we been doing? Nothing? Just making, cell phone satellites? Or did Apollo 17 mark something else? In which, like I said, our government finally wised up to the fact that it probably wouldn't be smart to just go up to the moon and then just release a bunch of photos and video. And, it's why they hire copy editors, right? I worked at a newspaper for years as a writer. And there's a reason why they hire copy editors. If you don't know what a copy editor is, there's usually 2 levels of them in each newspaper back when they would actually write print newspapers. Now we have a lot of, spell check software and grammar check software, and that has made life easier for writers. But the primary reason that copy editors had a job is because the fallibility of the human brain. Human beings by nature, and this is true. You can, research this. I invite you. By nature, we do not want to be wrong. It's just a flaw of the human character that actually propels us. Now, the byproduct of not wanting to be wrong is that we often will not see our own mistakes. So when you write like a 3,000-page story, no matter how many times you read that story over and over and over and reread it and reread it and reread it, once your mind has made a mistake, whether it's misspelling a word that just happens to look to you like it should be correct, or whether it's ending a sentence with the word the, and then starting the next sentence with the word the as a malfunction of the brain, our mind will continue to miss these errors. No matter how many times you read it over, the mind does this. So that's why they hire copy editors. A fresh mind. Somebody else that doesn't share the same tendencies, and somebody that is not a brain that thinks differently. Because that person will read over the same article that you wrote, spell check and grammar checked, 30 times, only to miss the same 5 mistakes over and over again. And that first copy editor will probably catch 3 out of those 5 mistakes, maybe 4. But usually, there's something that their mind does wrong. Some kind of mistake that they're overlooking. And because they have the innate ability to not want to be wrong, you have to have another copy editor read it. Until eventually, you get all of the errors out. This is the reason why it would be a really bad idea for NASA to take a ton of photos on a moon mission, or to shoot a bunch of video and start uploading them to websites and sending them out in a way that there is public access. Because you can say to the photo editor at NASA, hey, out of those 1,000 photos that we took, here's a list of 150 that we don't want to go out to the public. Yeah, there's a military base in this one. There's a tower in this one. There is, a pyramid in this one. Make sure you pull those all out before you upload the public offering. Well, in the same way with copy editing, the first guy that goes through would, probably catch them all, probably get them all out, but maybe not, And hopefully there's a third round of, copy editing, but it's just not a smart idea. Now, I only bring this up because this could be a reason why NASA has never commented on this. When you have a definitive answer to debunk something, it's pretty easy to just say, no, this is what it was. That's what's up. But when you want the story to just go away, sometimes the best way to do that is to just not comment on it. Maybe it was just a photo that slipped. And they went, oops. Someone said, what do we say? You say nothing. There's no mileage to a one-sided fight. That's true. If you have one side going, that's a pyramid, that's a pyramid, that's a pyramid, right? And the other side is saying nothing, you're only going to spend so much time on that story, And back then, I think you can get away with mistakes like that because there wasn't the web. There wasn't this quick way to examine things and to have everybody else share their thoughts and opinions on it like I'm doing now. This didn't exist back during the age of Apollo 17, but they definitely, could see the writing on the wall. I mean, they knew way back then that, this was all coming. This was all going to happen. Which takes us back to coincidence. What are the chances that on planet Earth, there's these triangular pyramids all over the world that resemble each other, that all have astrological alignments, that all point to the stars, often Orion's belt, if not due east, all around the world. And whether it's Phobos on Mars, Mars itself, or the moon, we're finding these pyramids everywhere. So what are the coincidences that you can go to the moon and burn a frame and it accidentally comes out looking exactly like a large pyramid with a monolith right next to it? Is this just a coincidence? I mean, wouldn't that be a pretty major coincidence? Now, to be fair and to play devil's advocate to my own question here, coincidences can happen all the time that are strange. I mean, the world is a crazy place, and every action you take is greater than 1,000,000,000 to 1 odds. And what I mean by that is, if you start breaking each action you take down, like if you asked me when I was 12 years old, if you just said 12-year-old Chad, what are the chances that on your birthday, when you turn 40 years old, you're going to be sitting on the sand in Santa Monica Beach? And you think back to every single decision that was made from 12-year-old Chad to 40-year-old Chad that would lead to me sitting on the beach in Santa Monica when I turned 40 years old. I mean, those odds are beyond winning the lottery. I mean, those odds are at the time, 1 in what, trillions? I mean, like every action that you take is actually you beating some sort of odd if you break it down that way. So there are crazy things that happen all the time that just happen to fit a narrative. I'll give you a couple examples. You ask the question, could an astronaut on the moon burn a frame that when You adjust the contrast. It appears to be a pyramid and a monolith. Well, what comes to mind with me is this case I did called Boy Pushed Me. That was on Paranormal State. It was the episode, you might remember this, where there was a boy on the second floor. And he was pushed out of the second floor window, which he fell and was badly injured. And he just kept saying, "Boy pushed me, boy pushed me." And at the time, there was no other child that could have pushed him. But there was a child that previously lived in the home that passed away. And it was believed that his ghost was there. Boy pushed me. Boy pushed me. That's what he kept saying. Boy pushed me. So we investigated the house that night, and nothing really happened there. But the family did have these stories about how the spirit of the boy who lived in the home previously was often seen in the woods, or it was believed that he was in the woods, and that the boy who was pushed would often wander out to the woods without telling anybody. So we decided we were going to investigate the woods, the forest. Depends on where you're from, whether they call it the woods or the forest or not. In Southern Texas, we call it the woods. You can go out and play in the woods. So we decided we were going to go out into the woods or the forest, and we were going to investigate that night. Well, that night, it was just cold enough to create this very low-level fog that came off this little stream that was running through the woods. And it was obvious enough that when I first got out there was 4 or 5 times where I about jumped out of my clothes, man. I was so freaked out because I kept spinning around, and I would turn my camera and I would catch the tail end of this fog being blown at ground level off this tiny little ravine, this little creek that went right through the woods. Because at first glance, it would look, guys, it looked like Industrial Light and Magic came in and CGI'd the most amazing looking ghost you've ever seen. It looked perfect, especially when you would drop everything to night shot. I mean, the problem with night shot, when you take things and you color code them down to 2-scale or grayscale of any color, is you really lose depth. You lose how close or how far things are away. You lose how quickly things are moving. This is why we only see black and white photos of the moon from the government. I mean, the moon is not black and white. There's color to the moon. Have you ever wondered why all the moon footage is black and white and all the photos are black and white? I mean, think of the day and age where these photos were taken, when the video was shot. I mean, we were into color film, you know? And even today, with all the probes that go out there, the Clementine missions, like all that stuff, why do we wind up seeing black and whites? Well, because black and white, two-tone, monotone, however you want it, whatever you want to call it, it hides detail. It hides detail. It would be very easy to see if you were looking over a rocky landscape and, you know, the natural landscape color is a tan or an orange going right across a black or a white rooftop. But when you scale those to grayscale or two-tone and you make it 2 colors, then it becomes very hard to determine what is what from what. So when you're out in the woods and you got this little creek running by and this fog is coming off the water, it just looked like a ghost, and it looked like a child ghost because it was low-level fog that only came up to about your waist. And I had already debunked everything that I initially thought was weird before we ever got back to review our footage. And when I was out there, I could see that, oh man, this is one hell of an effect. I mean, this just looks like a ghost. I mean, it was one of those actions where you knew if you wanted to be a dirty piece of shit liar, then you can just tell the public it's a ghost and everybody would buy it because it looks so good. But I knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. And we went back and we did the evidence breakdown, and I didn't have anything. I came back, said, guys, I've looked through my tapes. I don't have anything. Well, right before we're going to basically, get into the explanations for different phenomena, we get a phone call from production. And they're genuinely trying to help us. They're not, trying to make up a ghost. I mean, they're basically saying, we're also looking at Chad's footage because once I'm done shooting, you hand off your tapes and they clone them. And usually the clones went back to PRS and the originals went to the studio. And so I get a call right away and they're saying, Chad, we think you might have missed something, man. And I'm like, okay. So they send me the footage and they're like, this looks like the spirit of a child ghost running through the woods. And like I said, guys, you couldn't have built it better on CGI. I mean, you could have brought LucasArts in. You could have brought Industrial Light and Magic in. It never looked so good. But I knew it wasn't real. I knew that it was a coincidence. It was a coincidence that on that night, when we were looking for a child spirit that was known to play at night in the woods, that the temperature was just right and the breeze was just strong enough to create this ghostly looking form that from a certain distance, about 14 feet away, 14 to 15 feet, it would absolutely look like a child spirit. So that's one of those things where it's like, was that all a coincidence? Well, that night I voted that it was. I said it's not evidence. That's not a ghost. And the one they found, looked, like I said, it looked like a child ghost. I think I said I've got 30 more that aren't as convincing as that one, but there's at least 30 more examples of this, on my footage. I would just tell the editors to keep looking. They're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. It's all over the place. So yeah, it does happen where coincidences like that happen. Another example was when we did the Ghost Prophecy special. And this was just a perspective issue. Again, when you drop things to grayscale or to night shot, two-tone, you lose perspective as far as where are you at in a room. Because color is just tremendous detail. It provides tremendous detail. And there was an online discussion as to whether or not there was somebody in the room with me. Some believed it was a ghost. Those who, the skeptical minded, those that want to condemn you to evil doing, said, it's not a ghost. That's Mary Beth in that room with Chad. Look, you can see right when the door opens. And what they didn't see is that it was neither. It was neither. All that happened was we went from one scene where I'm holding the camera and it's looking out the door. Okay, so the door's locked. My camera's facing the door and the door is fixing to open. It's just starting to open. So my camera's looking out. But on the other side of the door, there is Mary Beth, Joey, and the guy who locked me in. So there's a camera over there, and the camera is placed just beyond Mary Beth's shoulder, where you can see this gentleman grabbing the door to open it. And the cut takes place right as the door is halfway opened. So you can't tell that you're jumping from a camera inside of the room to a camera outside of the room. So when they cut to my camera, Mary Beth is in view on my camera, but she's in the hallway. She's outside. She's standing next to the guy that's unlocked the door. Could it just be a coincidence that when I unlocked the door to room 18, and I was the first person to spend the night in there in 14 years, it just so happened that when I left, all these different elements, the distance that she's away from the camera, the fact that there's a 2-camera cut that goes on right when the door is halfway open, the fact that it's green screen, it's two-tone. All these things had to happen to make it appear like there was either a ghost or a person in the room with me that I didn't see. Was that coincidental? Yeah, it was. It was all coincidental. And it all seems unbelievable that it would take, that many bizarre events to line up perfectly in an edit where quite unintentionally this kind of error of perspective happens. So when someone says, isn't there a chance that you can, point one of these old cameras at the ground when burning film and, rifle off and burn the final few frames to a reel? Is it possible that if you play with the contrast, you would discover a pyramid? Well, here's the thing. It is possible. But in 2008, when flying past the moon, the Hubble Space Telescope took some more photos of the moon, in which a shocking photo was captured. If you look on the screen right now, you'll see that photo. Very close to Cydonia, there appears to be a pyramid on the moon. Although they've been asked several times about this, NASA has given no explanation for the photo taken. Thank you all for listening to episode number 75 of the In a Crowded Room podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.